Pomeriggio signore e signori, prego anche chi si trova nel foyer di prendere posto perché dobbiamo iniziare davvero un pomeriggio molto serrato, come del resto è serratissimo il programma di questo primo forum dell'arte contemporanea italiana e siamo davvero lieti di avere iniziato davvero al meglio. Allora anche a nome di tutto il comitato promotore, dello staff del Museo Pece, ancora una volta benvenuti a questo primo forum. Ricordo soltanto che appunto mentre parliamo e mentre avremo il piacere di sentire i talk dei nostri illustri ospiti stranieri, sono in corso i tavoli della macroarea formazione alla Monash che relazioneranno qui dal Teatro Metastasio alle 17:30 con il coordinamento di Anna Daneri. Dunque, mentre i 7 tavoli di lavoro sono davvero in work in progress, abbiamo qui sul palco il piacere e anche davvero l'onore di poter ascoltare l'intervento di illustri ospiti stranieri, dei talk che ci aiuteranno a capire come alcune delle criticità strutturali e strategiche del nostro sistema dell'arte italiana sono stati affrontati, talvolta risolti o comunque sempre interpretati da altri paesi. E allora questo pomeriggio si alterneranno appunto 4 interventi stranieri, a partire dal professor José Tavares, che ringraziamo moltissimo per essere qui, farai anche un applauso per la sua presenza. Professor Tavares è dottore di ricerca all'Università di Harvard, specializzato in macroeconomia, nonché professore all'Università Nova de Lisboa e ricercatore del Center for Economic Policy Research in London, e le sue ricerche sono state pubblicate in riviste accademiche in Europa e negli Stati Uniti. Il professor Tavares ci parlerà del rapporto fra economia e cultura, economia ed arte, e come gli artisti possono porre nuove domande, spesso complementari o alternative anche al pensiero tecnico-scientifico, e quindi come l'arte possa incidere nell'innovazione e cambiamento sociale. Prego, professor Tavares, e grazie ancora.
Grazie. So I want to start by thanking Fabio Cavallucci and Pierluigi Sacco for the invitation. And I usually start my talks in this type of forum, apologizing for being an economist. But I've apologized so many times that now I want to apologize for 2 other things. One is that I'm speaking in English. I understand Italian, but I cannot speak. But I'll use one Italian word, which is a name, Baldessari, so that I can take comfort from. And the other thing is, I'll start a little bit maybe academic. It sounds academic, and at some point I will focus on contemporary art and try to convince you that I know very, very little about it. But let's see if I'm successful. So actually we start with this connection, culture and the economy, then we go to economy and innovation, and finally we come to contemporary art. Well, culture and the economy, these are 2 words that do not speak to each other very easily, that are kind of swear words, bad words when they are talking about each other, like they misunderstand each other. And there are reasons for this, but fortunately there is also change. So let me tell you one way to think about this system, and is to represent culture in different aspects of culture. So the broader circle is values and beliefs, things that are very invisible and very important for us. And then we have attitudes and behavior, things we do because of culture, things we do together or alone because of culture. And then I very simplistically put pop culture, meaning popular, more direct, more mass culture, and then high culture if you want. This is a bit outdated, but these circles are the world of culture. So circles, very nice things, not edges. This is culture. Everything that is economics I represent by, or economy I represent by a square, meaning very edgy, more edgy stuff. So you have the economy in red, and the economy is certainly today intersecting culture in all its facets. So the economy lives on and depends on beliefs, on attitudes, and also on high and low culture if you want, if you allow me. But then there's also cultural activities. So culture that produces things in the lato sensu. It could be images, it could be ideas, but things. And this cultural activities are part of the economy, but are also connected with the different definitions of culture. So, why do these worlds have so much difficulty talking to each other? Well, one problem is some of the things are very difficult to observe. So observability moves in this way. So if you have a cultural activity like a painting or a book, it's very observable, but it's very difficult to observe what is changing at the levels of beliefs, norms, values, assumptions, things that are very important and that are important for individuals and for the economy. On the other hand, we have the outputs, or if you want, the results of these cultural activities and cultural dimensions, and you have results that are very easy to pin down. So material stuff, direct, private, individual, that go through the market, things that have prices, for instance. This is very easy to observe, but probably it's not the most important. So you have things that are immaterial, indirect, that they affect in different ways, different people. They are public in the sense that they are shared, social, more than public, and they are non-market. So there are no prices attached. And the contemporary art is a specific thing that we will refer to later in this system. So if you want to defend the role of culture to policymakers, why culture is important in terms of its results, there's a list of things that now have been researched, and some very well researched. And even if you are a very traditional social scientist and economist, people have looked at all these things. So for instance, among the material things, you can look at the impact of culture on income, on equity and fairness, on firm performance, creativity. So there are studies that look at this. But you also have studies of the impact of culture on human and social capital, where human capital is more the type of the skills, the abilities that you accumulate individually, where social capital is the shared capital among a society or a group. Shared, for instance, with trust, shared by participation in common events. So all this has been looked at. Attitudes toward risk. So cultural exposure can change the attitudes towards risk, can change your tolerance of others. So all this is under the microscope of social science, and that is good. So we are moving somewhere. So let me tell you very briefly some of the difficulties we have to deal with. One is that the difficulties in this conversation is the difficulty of value. What is value? If you think about it, value is key for culture. We are always in the background discussing, is this a valuable cultural contribution? And value is very key for the world of culture, and value is very key for the world of the economy. But value means different things. Sometimes you can bring them together, but means very different things. So in the economy, it tends to be associated with a price and someone being willing to put resources for the thing. In art and culture, it's something else, and usually there's social, non-market elements to it. So one difficulty, the difficulty of value. The other thing is the difficulty of exchange. Not everything is exchanged. Much of what is culture is not directly exchanged. Maybe in contemporary art actually is one exception, where a lot is exchanged, but there are artists that make a point of producing, quote-unquote, objects, artistic objects that cannot be exchanged, that almost, in a sense, exist only in a moment and then disappear. So it's kind of a statement. So the difficulty of exchange, which is key for the economy, not so much it's not so key in art. The other thing is the difficulty of time. Art has a value that goes beyond time. So much of the artistic and cultural heritage we value has been produced by several generations ago, and we tend to think of the material as very immediate, worrying about things that we want today. The difficulty of the collective nature, I've talked about this, so individual versus the collective. Art produces meaning for a group of people, a nation, or the world, the cosmopolitan community. In economics, you tend to produce value that is exchanged individually between firms or individuals. The difficulty of the immaterial, we talked about this, the fact that much of the value of art is immaterial. And if you want, the difficulty of the other. So in economics, it's like a taboo to evaluate subjectively between goods. So no one will tell you this is more valuable than this. They will just tell you the market gives more value to this. In art, in culture, if we are honest about it, and that's a good thing, we almost always ascribe subjective value. So the consideration of taste, of individual preferences is always there. Okay? And finally, the difficulty of rationality. Social sciences tend to praise the rational world, which is very, very in the low. It's not very prestigious today. So rationality is not what it once was. As Nietzsche said, in everything, one thing is impossible, rationality. And in art, fortunately, we are dealing with things that we cannot always rationally understand, and that's part of the value of artistic production. So let's think a little bit of how the economy has changed and maybe how contemporary art can place itself in this innovative economy. Let's think of a city that many of us have heard about. This is the city of Detroit in the United States. And in blue, you have the population, which goes up to almost 2 million. And then after the mid-50s, it starts going down. Today is below 1 million. Detroit is a remarkable city because it's a city that became a mega city and then shrunk. There's very few cases in history where a city goes to 2 million and then suddenly goes below 1 million. Well, Detroit gave us two things that are very important. One has to do with transportation, cars. So it was the motor capital of the world, Motown. It was called Motown. And it gave us another thing which was connected with this. As African-American workers moved north to Detroit, gave us the Motown record label, which gave us soul and a lot of music that is still very influential today. So it's interesting, it's a very industrial city and also produced a very specific and influential cultural outcome. Well, you see it going up and down. For instance, you have the arsenal of a democracy just before World War II when Detroit was building the ships for war in Europe and against Japan. And then you have Motown Records founded in 1959. And then you have a series of crises. Until today, you have several documentaries, excellent documentaries online. It's very difficult to control the decline of Detroit. So very innovative city, industrially and culturally. These two connected, and yet things didn't work out so well. Just by curiosity, this is a tourism advertising for Detroit. So Detroit City, so part of the identity of the city, even identity, had to do with industry. And this is Motown Records, which of course is a reference to Motortown. Okay? So what changed? If you want to think...
Just need to put this a little bit. Okay.
So, if you want to think of different stages in the economy, Detroit was very successful. It had a foothold on services, namely music production, but it didn't make the transition to what people call today the knowledge economy and more deeply the experience economy. The knowledge economy refers to the value that knowledge, including culture, brings to the economy. The economy gives you, refers to the idea that people value experiences. So people are able and are willing to give resources for things that bring meaning to their lives, bring experience to their lives. And certainly, art is one of them. So for instance, it has been quite surprising in the last decades how you have lines in almost every large city when you have a properly designed museum exhibition. So the museums have arrived to the masses, and nobody, I think, would have predicted this a few decades ago. Borrowing from Pierluigi Sacco, sitting here in the front row, we can think of different stages where culture relates to the economy, from culture 1.0, which is very well exemplified, actually probably in some sense born in Firenze, where you have the patrons, the private patrons, and they are the audience. The masses are absent, the state is absent in proper sense, the artists are few and far between, and the technology is basic, so painting, sculpture, and the values have to do with prestige, status that people are looking for, that's why they are paying for art, and then other things. The major economic sector is agriculture and commerce. So then you have culture 2.0, if you want, in the nomenclature of Sacco, where something very important happened. You had the technical reproduction of works of art. Namely, you had cinema, photography, things that could be used by the state to manipulate people. And so the state comes in and starts to be financier of the arts and directing the arts to the masses. A lot of the tragedies we have in Europe would not be possible without the use of culture in the sense of cinema, in the sense of radio, music, other things that were in a propagandistic way and made the masses move towards disaster. So this is culture 2.0. In the last phase, and I think this is the most relevant for us and for contemporary art, we have that the wealthy and the powerful are relevant, certainly for contemporary art, very, very relevant. Contemporary art, I've said in another forum, is in bed every day and every night with capitalism. This is good and bad. It's not necessarily good, but contemporary art is completely hooked on capitalism. That's why you have the galleries opening in China and in the Middle East and in Russia. It's not because you want, it's because it's following the money. So in this sense, contemporary art has no excuses, quote unquote, not to use this access to do great and interesting things. You have that the masses become producers as well as audience. This is also true of the actual production of contemporary art. The artist becomes, the frontier between the artist and the audience is diffused, also very key in contemporary art, and the technology. Now we have accessible technologies for the production and for the mass diffusion of art. So this can be taken care of. The overarching values have to do with the cosmopolitan and the global village. So the values are no longer national and propagated by means like cinema and other means that could be very well appropriated by the state. Now we have a mix and a kind of emerging cosmopolitan values. Okay? So now I'm going to the part where I don't know anything about, almost, but I'm going anyway. Let's talk about contemporary art. I think many of you have seen this photograph. How many have seen this photograph before? No? Some people. This is a very important photographer. Dmitry Bartelmans is a Russian Soviet of Jewish origin, and this is a photograph of 1941 called Attack. So this is a mean of the culture 2.0. This is an expression of the culture 2.0 in a sense. It's a photograph. It's a tremendous photograph because it expresses the dynamics and also the stillness of war. So it's an iconic photograph, but it's still, if you want, it has nothing to do with contemporary art? Well, there's another photograph by Barthelmans that I like very much, and I use when I need it, and I need it often. This picture is from 1945. If you want, this is again a completely modern, not contemporary, modern picture. What do you find here? Well, you find a lot of things that modernity gave us, including the disaster of Second World War. Everyone fighting in the Second World War believed in technology, industrialization, mass production, rationality, everything was there. And this is the end of it, 1945. You see that these are Russian soldiers, and you kind of understand they are in a house that has been destroyed by war. They are in a very calm demeanor, so you have some people sitting next to the piano, they seem obviously paying attention, and there's a guy with a gun, so war is still present. And there's one with a hand on the piano. So this is just a modern photograph, except that Barthelmans, without knowing it, produced contemporary art by giving it a title. And the title was Tchaikovsky. Suddenly, you understand much more than the photograph gives you. This is, of course, a German home that has been destroyed by war. Russians have arrived in the home, are pausing between the combats, are calm, paying attention, and something that is extremely violent and extremely significant. The photographer tells us they are playing Tchaikovsky. So it's a kind of revengeful element, but it is an element, a confrontation between the title, the text, and the image that gives you something very new. And so I think this is a good example of what, to me, is the power of a contemporary art. It's the mixing of different means, different media, in a way that brings powerful meaning and meaning that is lasting. In summary, the media, contemporary art, to me, has all to do with the media and the message. So the media is not the message, the media and the message. And I think a lot of it has to do with mixed media. So in the sense, text with image, image and moving image, materials you can touch, you feel the texture of, a contrast between things that are permanent and stay versus momentary and go away. So all this is part of the use of media by contemporary art. And then you have an ambivalent message in the sense that you are no longer in a world of simplistic, rural, or nationalistic ideas. You have cosmopolitan confusion, if you want, that you need to address. So you have a message that sometimes is frugal and clean. It's very to the point and very powerful, like the title Tchaikovsky. It's empathetic. You understand. A lot of the powerful contemporary art has some congeniality with the public, either because of the material, either because of the movement, either because of the way it involves the audience. It is world and news conscious. I think the good contemporary art is hooked to things that are happening, people care about, things that are political, social, etc. It mixes high and lowbrow elements, meaning easy elements and more sophisticated elements, different readings, and it challenges the status quo. Okay, I think this is, for me, a good definition of good contemporary art. So contemporary art, in a sense, is a field of artistic production where the connection with the economy, with the economy of the 21st century, the experience economy, the technologically able economy, is easier than for other artistic areas. So contemporary art naturally connects with the material and technological, which is in flux, is changing. This is naturally a means, a place where contemporary art wants to be. Mixing of high and pop culture, this is also part of it. The global economy, politics, it communicates about this and the cosmopolitan and the personal, while at the same time, it seems that it's set to challenge the status quo. Okay, so What my argument here is that contemporary art, in a sense, naturally solves many of the translation problems between the economy and and culture, because it's actual, it's news, it's of the moment, it's involved with what's happening, it criticizes. The problem, challenging the status quo risks becoming the new status quo. And we all have come across this in art. Challenging because you challenge. And suddenly, something that could be original becomes less and less original. So what do we need? We need artists contemporary artists, now I mean, they need I think, to be before things like information, intelligence, sophistication, and yes, there's a missing word because the slide was a bit disformatted, and yes, culture. So, information about the world, intelligence about the world. The world is not simple, not even the economy is simple, not even capitalism and democracy are simple. So you need to think about them, and yes, you need to have a culture to be able to use culture to challenge it. Okay? Written but repetition, something that refers to something very congenial to people. Maybe people were punished in primary school by repeating a word, writing a word over and over again, and it's self-critical about art. So it's very, very to the point of what I wanted to make, and actually that's the point I want to make. And with this telling piece, I will stop, and I assure you we will not make